figure out what the SEC was actually going to do, and before we actually had the law, and walking through what that looked like, and now finally they get to launch their business after a long, arduous road. Because when your business is totally dependent on regulations, you can't do anything until that regulation is available. So I'm excited to see what happens next with this industry, and in particular Crowdfunding, which is a local Colorado-based equity crowdfunding platform. So with that, let me introduce Dave again and
the topic is crowdfunding is almost legal. So you guys can decide at the end of the presentation what that is. Come on in. Real fast, I actually want to introduce Bruce Morgan. Bruce, say hello, because obviously we have a startup portfolio that might be able to help you, maybe. Bruce also has a startup in the space called E2BI.com. So if you guys have invoices out to customers, that's another option I would recommend you at least consider. So just want to point that out as well. So first and foremost, I hate to do this, but unlike Roger, I'm not an attorney. I'm not your attorney. I follow the space closely. But what we're going to talk about tonight, honestly, guys, is pretty delicate stuff. And at the end of the day, I want you to take this as informational. And you'll see it as one of my implications at the end if you're interested in pursuing this. Honestly, I hate to say it, hire an attorney. Hire an attorney who understands securities laws, who has followed this. So take this as informational, hopefully interactive. Feel free to raise your hand and ask questions at any time. Anytime, do not write your PPM tonight based on what I tell you, and then I'm looking forward to it later. I'm going to real fast throw up this glossary, because I realized at the last minute before I got in my car and drove up here that there's a few things in here that might not be as familiar to everyone else as it is to me. I'm going to skip over crowdfunding because I assume everyone knows it, but if not, I'll leave this slide up long enough for you to talk about it. Do you have a question, sir? No? All right. So I'm going to talk about, there's going to be a lot of reference to Title II. So there was something called the Jobs Act passed in April of 2012, April of last year. And basically, this is one of the forms of crowdfunding, occasionally referred to as accredited crowdfunding, because only accredited investors can participate. But what Title II essentially did from a big picture was it removed an 80-year-old ban on general solicitation, meaning advertising or telling people that you're raising money. Imagine telling people that you're raising money when you're raising money. Title III, which we'll talk about a little bit less, also comes out of the Jobs Act. It's the third section of the Jobs Act. And what this basically does is legalize what is more generally known as investment crowdfunding, meaning you can tell everyone that you're raising money, and you can accept money from anyone as well. So that's another section. So those are, yes ma'am.
Question?
Yes.
Maybe this is a stupid question, but why would it have been illegal to begin with?
Why would it
have been illegal to begin with?
Why would it have been, you know what? Let's talk about why it would have been illegal to begin with.
You're a shill.
Man, how much is that?
Now, I get an iPod, the new 16 at the end, right?
No. Here's the background to all this. So 1933, it was a good time to be in the economy. Actually, it was a terrible time. Stemming from the Great Depression, Congress passed the Securities Act of 1931, 33, 34, and have amended these acts basically ongoing up until today, essentially. But the Securities Act of 1933 was what banned general solicitation unless you registered your security with the federal government, and then with some exceptions with state governments. So the answer as to why it's illegal is it was banned in 1933, and the reason it was banned in this period was many people, or some people, believe that the reason for the Great Depression was so many people lost money on stocks that had no basis. They were pure fraudulent. It was so hard to decipher because there were so many great sales pitches, and the only thing you had to depend on essentially was the person selling it to you. You didn't have the internet to look it up. There wasn't Morningstar to check out your mutual funds, or movies, or CNBC. So the reason it was banned was the concept of essentially for non-public information where there isn't a lot of third-party available data. Let's just give this to people who can afford to lose money to even know that there are investments out there. Agree with that or not? I know Bruce doesn't agree with that, but agree with that or not, this law was passed 80 years ago, and that's why, you might have found a cool startup and then found out that they raised money and been like, how come they never asked me? I've been one of their early adopters. The reason was they can't even tell you. It goes back pretty far. Now, lucky for everyone here, my history is going to skip all the way until 2012. When Congress passed the Jobs Act and President Obama signed it into law, the Jobs Act is kind of interesting. It was basically 6 laws. Does that answer your question, by the way?
It does, that's fabulous, thank you.
There were 6 laws that the House of Representatives had already passed, and the Senate had voted on none of them, and very few had made headway in the Senate. So what the House of Representatives did is they packaged 6 laws together, hence these Title II and Title III, and there's obviously 4 others. They packaged them together and they created the Jobs Act. Because they called it the Jobs Act, the Senate had to vote on it and pass it, basically. But there was obviously a lot of give and take. There were some things that the Senate had wanted to see. When they packaged them together, it made it more palatable. It was I think literally the most bipartisan passed bill in 2012 in both houses of Congress. The president signed it almost immediately. There wasn't a lot of back and forth. For something that's bipartisan, it's amazing how long the rest of the timeline is good. So in August of last year, so Title II had, the SEC had until July 4th, they had 90 days from Obama signing it to write the rules and make this go legal. So, well past 90 days later, in fact 120 days later, the SEC released proposed rules in which they invited the general public, any American who wanted to write into the SEC via their website and give your opinion about those proposed rules. And then, through a bunch of politics, nothing ever happened, essentially. Until just a few weeks ago, just about a month ago, where all of a sudden the SEC essentially approved the exact same proposed rules. So what many people believe happened was the chairman of the SEC at the time basically said this wasn't going to happen on her watch. She cleaned up post-Madoff, and she was going to leave with a clean track record and not passing new legislation that whether it does or doesn't lead to fraud, it wasn't going to happen on her watch. So she left. President Obama had to assign a new chairman of the SEC. It had to be passed through Congress. Eventually, once Mary Jo White got to work, this was on the priority list. And so a year late, we basically have published rules. And what's going to happen next is it'll go live in September. Whoops. Missed a space there. But it'll go live on September 23rd because the rules were passed, and it takes 2 months once it goes into the Federal Register for it to go live. Real fast before you get too excited, even on September 23rd, it won't happen right away. We'll talk about some of the restrictions. So I would expect that in reality you're not going to see this used until October, November, and mass adoption will probably take a couple of years until people really feel out and see who gets sued and over what, and kind of what the true terms are. And I don't say that kiddingly. I mean, in reality, there's a lot of stuff in these final rules that leave it up to testing the waters. And the SEC said, hey, we're going to give some guidelines, and ultimately we'll let the courts decide what the hard and fast rules are. So mass adoption might take some time. As for this Title III, where you can generally solicit and anyone with dollars that believes in your cause can invest, I put up question marks. Those like Brian who have their ear to the ground in the crowdfunding community hear that these proposed rules might be coming in the fall. That's kind of been thrown out there. But lots of things have been thrown out there in the past. So, who knows, is quite frankly the answer to that. So that's the background. So let's talk about the opportunity here. So again, you can now tell people that you're raising capital. And the challenge here was in the past, if you were raising capital for your startup, and the Wall Street Journal called, and they wanted to talk to you about your startup, and this is going to be the best PR you can ever get for your startup, you might have to turn down that interview, because just in case the reporter asked the wrong question and published the wrong piece of information, just in case I was in a room like this and I happen to mention that we may or may not be raising money for my startup, the odds are you weren't going to get in trouble, but you could, and it could cause a lot of problems for your company, the directors, and yourself personally. So the fact is, if nothing else, it kind of clears the way that you can actually announce that you're raising capital. And of course what that means is that more investors will hear about you. And not just more investors will hear about you, but more investors might actually get into the angel investing game just because they're now hearing pitches through whatever mechanisms where they wouldn't have sought it before. They're hearing greatly expand your exposure as a company looking to raise money, as well as the total number of investors and dollars out there for early stage and growth stage startups. And of course, it also means that all communications are possible. If you can't tell anyone you're raising money, you can't use Twitter, because you can't tell just your friends and family and known accredited investors using Twitter. But I put up here an in theory, we'll talk about why in a second. It might, this is where the courts might rule on this, and we'll see. It might be impractical to use a lot of communication vehicles or some communication vehicles, but in theory, the world's the limit. So let's put up what I'm going to nicely call considerations, also known as why this isn't so great, or this isn't going to change the world. So you can tell anyone in the world that you're raising money. We're raising money for my startup. This is great. The problem is that only accredited investors can participate. This is a short link. If you want to type it in if you're curious as to what the exact SEC definition of accredited investor is. It's pretty black and white. So there's not a lot of fudge on the sides. So there's some considerations to, do I really want to tell the world and stand up in front of a room like this that I'm raising capital, and then when you say you're interested, say, sorry, not from you, though, for example. So it's something to consider. Secondarily, and where this really comes into play, is that you have to take, this is where the SEC left it really wide open, reasonable steps to verify that the person who's writing you a check actually qualifies as an accredited investor. So I've told everyone that they're accredited. You've convinced me enough that you're accredited that I'm going to sit down and have a pitch with you or a conversation with you. But now that you're handing me a check, now the responsibility is on me, the fundraiser, or you, the fundraiser, to determine whether you actually are accredited. So that could include things like looking at your tax returns for the last few years, or if you're an officer of a major public company, I can go onto the website or Yahoo Finance and I can verify how much your income is based on 10Qs and other financial reports. I can have a broker-dealer tell me that you're accredited and give me written confirmation. So, these are